Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, one of the big things that I've learned in over 1,300 interviews on this tech podcast is the role that technology is playing in defence systems. And this is a topic that I wanted to explore today. And I think I've got the perfect guest because BAE Systems is one of the world's leading global defence, security and aerospace companies. And they recently announced an applied intelligence spin-out cybersecurity venture called SOC.OS in another milestone in what has been an eventful and remarkable few years for its CEO, David Mareels. And David is a graduate of BAE Systems' demanding Sigma Leadership Programme, and his journey with the company has taken him from the project engineering management in Portsmouth to a Eurofighter Typhoon programme in Warton, before settling in applied intelligence back in 2018. And during this time, he became involved in the corporate incubator programme, taking a lead role at SOC.OS. And David has since dedicated his time to the SaaS project, which is essentially a tool designed to help small internal security teams manage the growing number of alerts produced by all those threat detection tools. So for me, today's guest is going to tick two big boxes that are crucial for my guest selection process. One, we can learn about how technology is transforming an industry and providing business value, but also there is an incredible human story behind it where David can share his journey, which has taken him from an engineering graduate to a CEO at a tech company. Sounds like this one could have it all. No pressure, David. But enough from me. Let's get David onto the podcast now. So, a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
All right. Well, first off, great to be here, Neil. Thanks so much for having me, and hi to all the listeners. So a little bit about me. My name is David Mareels. I was born and bred in Melbourne, Australia, but don't incorrectly assume that I am full, true blue Aussie. I'm actually very European. So parents are actually Belgian and Croatian. So the accent you're hearing, Neil, perhaps a first for the show, is a Flemish Croatian one. I lived in Melbourne most of my life. I did a bit of stint in Singapore when I was younger. I spent a year abroad in Spain throughout university, and now I've been living and working in the UK for the last 7 years or so. In Melbourne, I studied mechanical engineering, but in my undergrad as well, I picked up Spanish. So I learned Spanish on the side, and hence it makes sense for my year abroad in Spain to solidify the language skills. And during my time in Melbourne, I think from probably 17 onwards, I developed a passion for sort of teaching and tutoring. So my father was a professor, an engineering professor, so run in the blood, I think. And I really enjoyed it. Started teaching my brother maths, and then physics, and then economics, and then anything with numbers, really. So from 17 onwards, and then I continued that on. And throughout my studies, as I was studying my mechanical engineering masters, I would teach first, second year university subjects as well, engineering and maths and STEM-based subjects. And that will become apparent why I'm saying that in a second, because I then packed up at 2014, finished my degree, and I moved to London in the hope of starting my career with BAE Systems on a program called the Sigma Leadership Programme. And as you can imagine, so for the aforementioned reasons, my nationality and the places I've lived, you can imagine, Neil, the security clearance and the contract wasn't as straightforward as it could have been. And I think from the time of accepting the conditional offer to start with BAE, my first career, it took, I think, just shy of 2 years, maybe a year and a half before conditional saying, yes, I'm in, to actually starting was a year and a half. And why I'm mentioning that is, I packed up shop and packed up my bags and said wave goodbye to mum and dad and family at 24, and came to London expecting the career to start anytime soon. But as you know, things don't always go to plan. And so what I did was I did what I did best back in Melbourne, which was teach. So I started tutoring mathematics in London. All of a sudden it became, I got a good handful of customers within maybe the first month. Word of mouth spread, and then I sort of called my old buddy from Melbourne Uni. I said, Cam, you should come over here. I think there's a bit of a business here. And he, in Triages fashion, packed up. He quit his grad job in Deloitte, and he came over, and we started a bit of a business. So that's sort of where the entrepreneurial journey started for me. We built an agency, a tutoring agency. We built it to about 50, 60 tutors within the year and a half, 2 years. And so, as you can imagine, it was a bit of a hard decision when the BAE finally started. It was, do I just continue doing the tutoring, or do I jump into BAE? And obviously, I jumped into BAE Systems. The tutoring was always it was a hobby, passion turned into a business. But then the BAE was the career. So I jumped in, joined the Sigma Leadership Program, and where I spent a couple of years. So I lived in Portsmouth, and I'm sure we'll get onto this, but lived and worked in Portsmouth for a bit on ships. Then I worked on planes in the north in Lancashire, and then I jumped into the cyber division of BAE Systems, where I spent the last few years. And long story short, what I was doing within BAE, I joined as what they call the venture lead of an early stage cybersecurity startup in its own right, but for BAE. And now fast forward the clock a couple of years to today, and I actually am the CEO of SOCOS Cybersecurity. So we've actually spun out an early stage product from BAE to now being a standalone company in its own right. And that happened, Neil, 6 weeks ago. So fresh off the block.
Fantastic. What a great story as well. I think over 1,300 tech interviews of people in 60 to 75 different countries around the world. I've got to say, I think you are my first Spanish-speaking Aussie with a Flemish-Croatian back.
There's always a first. I'll take it. I'll take the gold medal. Thanks.
But I mean, if we start at the very beginning, BAE Systems is one of the world's leading global defense security and aerospace companies. So like we were talking about a few moments, I can see why that security clearance would have taken a little bit longer considering your background. But can you offer a brief overview of the kind of problems that BAE Systems solves, as much as you can, of course?
Sure. No, well, yeah, as you said, BAE Systems, big company, big global engineering aerospace company. They work across sort of 4 domains, I would say. So air, maritime, land, and cyber. And essentially, I think in a nutshell, they're there to protect national security, the people, and keep critical information infrastructure secure. I've spent most of my time in the cyber domain. So sort of the division within BAE Systems is called Applied Intelligence. So that's where the SOC.OS journey began. So I know that part of the business better than the rest. But basically the cyber division then provides sort of cyber intelligence and security capabilities, again, to protect nations, businesses, and people, mainly against cyber crime or crime in general, terrorism, state conflict. When I say this cyber division of BAE, it's a company in its own right? It's 4,000 people, 17 countries. So the cyber division of the large global BAE is massive in its own right. And I think a really exciting place to work, and an extremely great training ground for early careers.
And speaking of that great training ground, you did say a few moments ago, you were a graduate of the BAE Systems Sigma Leadership Program, which I would imagine would be incredibly demanding. Can you tell me a little bit more about that journey?
Sure. So the Sigma Leadership Program, the ethos behind that was I joined as on the engineering scheme, and it was basically a program that was well suited for those that loved the technical side, were good at the technical side, but also loved working with the people. And that was sort of right in my sweet spot. I taught the engineering subjects. I knew the fundamentals and the theory really well, but I absolutely loved the people side of things as well. So the program was a hand in glove fit for me. And essentially how the program works is it's a 3-year program, and the company then rotates you around the business. So say compared to a traditional grad program where you would maybe be placed in, say, just the cyber division, and you'd rotate around the cyber division, gaining experience. This was more of a go into land, go into air, go into sea, and get experience across the wider business. And so it provided for me, especially as an Aussie living abroad, that provided the opportunity to travel around the UK and even international. And so I jumped at the opportunity, and sort of where I started, as I said, I worked in Portsmouth. So shout out to any Portsmouth listeners there. I worked in the Her Majesty's Naval Base, and what I was doing there was I worked, in fact, not on ships as people would think, but actually the supporting infrastructure around those ships. So, the big Queen Elizabeth aircraft carriers, they were coming in and they were docking, they were planning to dock at the naval base, and we needed to beef up the electrical capacity on site. So what I did there as my first role straight out of uni, so they put you in quite big demanding roles, was actually to manage sort of the bid stage of the combined heat and power plants. So we were building a power plant on the site to help with the electrical capacity. And so I ran sort of the engineering side of things and basically down selected the tender for that. So it was quite technical, had to get into the details, but also, again, very, very vendor focused and supplier, dealing with the suppliers and then managing the stakeholders internally. And then I moved from Portsmouth after a year to Preston, or Lytham St Anne's, in fact. So shout out if anyone's around that in Lancashire. Had a really good time there. Worked in military aircraft. It was more a data role, so quite technical role. I jumped in. I was working with a large aircraft testing rig, and I was looking at the data coming off this test rig, and we were doing sort of data and analysis. And I basically had to wear a hat of like the internal data consultant to see if we can, improve the current process, the way they deal with the data, they capture the data, they analyze it, they clean it, etc. And I think that was probably the highlight of my career there, because we took a process which took 200 hours and we shaved it down to something like 25 minutes. So it was a really exciting, a lot of coding, but yeah, again, a demanding role. And then learned absolute loads, and then moved on to cyber. So that's when I moved to London. And that's where the whole journey begins with SOC.OS. It was, Dave, you've done a little bit of the business side before. We're running a corporate incubator, so super entrepreneurial, fast-paced part of the business within cyber. It was called the Futures team. And they said, come and join us. I worked there for a few years before then taking on SOC.OS. So internally, I was known as the venture lead. And so I worked there for a few years, and then fast forward obviously to today, which is now we've spun that out, and that is a independent business in its own right, which I'm leading. So I've left BAE and I've left the Sigma program a bit earlier than planned, but it was definitely the right decision.
And that's one of the reasons I was excited to get you on today, because when I read that the BAE Systems Applied Intelligence had successfully spun off at this new cybersecurity company following an internal incubation process, I just felt compelled to find out more. So can you talk us through the innovation process and how you matured the venture within BAE Systems and then went on to secure external funding? Because again, it's a great story, isn't it?
No, indeed. And I mean, it's fascinating to see the sort of from the corporate side how you run this. And I think my learnings and my takeaways and to sort of shine light on that innovation process was one thing that we still take today, and we're running it within our company as a big culture for us, was the fact that and the whole philosophy behind this innovation team and the process was around problems, being problem led and being problem focused and customer centric. What that means is, I'll try to put a bit of color around that, is don't go out and build a product. Don't go out, build a piece of technology, and then try to find a customer that is going to use that, who's going to buy that. What you do is you don't do blue sky thinking. You don't go in and you just build new tech or launch some more of the same tech, but you go out to market and you spend months and months and months speaking to organizations, to peers, to colleagues, to explore a certain problem space. And you go in and you peel the onion back, you ask loads of questions, you do LinkedIn ads, you do online surveys to fully fundamentally understand a problem. And then not only understand the problem, but understand whether that problem is pervasive in the wider market. And then if it's all a yes, there's a big problem here. Yes, it's pervasive. Yes, people would be willing to pay to take that problem off their hands. And yes, we can play in the space. I think we have a rough idea of how we can play in this space. It's not, yes, we have the solution now, and nowhere near it. There's not one line of code has been written. And so that's how they work. It's if I have yes to all those problems, and indeed we can then start to think about a solution, that's when you progress the idea forward. So it's almost flipped in reverse, where you normally, when you ask someone to come up with something innovative, they think of something future tech orientated. Whereas this process internally, the futures team, is flipping that. And it's saying, no, don't think of tech, think of problems and validate those problems, validate that they're at scale, and then think about the technology. And that's how SOCOS started. We went out, we spoke to the infosec security world for months. We gathered lots of market intel. We saw what messaging people were clicking on LinkedIn rather than other messaging. So we did some A/B testing. And with all that information, all that market gathering, that's when we started to put lines of code down and to build architectural diagrams. And then fast forward, obviously, once we've understood there's a pain, you then build a team. So that's when sort of I came in, was okay, let's assemble the team who's actually now going to take all this market evidence and a little bit of technology and actually build a product. So build the MVP, so build the minimal viable product, take it out to market, sell the minimal viable product, find early adopting customers that are going to be excited about your vision and is going to work with you, and not just pay you for the solution off your hands and then no longer work with you, but no, work with you, find the solution, will take the pain away, but the work with us to shape the product. And that's what we did for a year and a half, 2 years within BAE. And we got it to a point where we had a few handful of customers, paying customers, using the product, shaping the roadmap with us, a team fully assembled, and an MVP product, an operational product. And then to answer your question about the securing external funding, as I said, so previously it was BAE focused in cyber, very much focused on the government and financial services and insurance space. But prior to that, they had a commercial product division, and that's where SOC.OS was sitting. And as you know, those are large companies. They hone their strategies to focus on where really their brand resonates and where their sweet spot is. And that's what happened with us. So they had a strategic shift in focus to really hone down on government and the FS space. And then they made the decision to divest a large part of the commercial business, the product business. And that's where I was sort of sitting. And I went, okay, interesting. What are we going to do with SOC.OS, which is early stage product and great IP and great tech? And they said, and BAE were awesome at this. They had it all fully in their right to say, well, guys, we're going to shut it down. But no, they were supportive, and they said, well, this is great. Let's make the most of this. And what we did, again, sort of the silver lining moment here was, well, it's too early to sell, so let's not sell it, but let's see if we can spin it out with external venture capital investment. And so they were supportive throughout that process, and that's sort of the driver there, that strategic shift in direction, the divestment. But then I went out to market and I said, look, this is a cool product. This is a great piece of tech. We've got great customers, great vision. Who wants to come on board alongside BAE and take it and help us carve it out and stand up an own independent business? And sort of that's the story, and that's how it came to be where we are today.
Fantastic. And like you said, it is out there now. So for decision makers listening and people involved in the industry, how does the SOC.OS platform actually work? Just give me a bit of an overview on that.
Sure. So yes, I think we're all familiar with basic security products such as antivirus systems and firewalls. Most everyone's heard of solutions like that. Now think of that within a company context. You've got 2,000 people. You've got probably 6 or 7 of these security tools deployed. And now what happens, all these security tools, they work in a very similar way. And as follows, they work as, they say, oh, there's something potentially malicious here, and they send out a text alert to the person, for a human to read and then analyze that and then react to that. Now, if you think you've got 7 or 8, 10 security tools deployed, and you've got a 2,000 seat organization that is sending out these alerts, 10,000 a day, and you have a small team to manage that becomes a massive burden. And it's a huge problem. And the problem really is, which alert do I address first? And how do I just know, where do I focus my attention? And just to give you an idea, Neil, out of all these 10,000 alerts, rough rule of thumb is 96% of them are false positives. So it's a spotting the needle in the haystack problem, which is really hard for a human to do, especially across 6 different silo tools. And so SOC.OS platform, how it works is it's above all of those tools. It sucks in those data alerts and those security alerts, and then it helps augment that small team by saying, hey, you should be looking here. So I'll package all those alerts up. I'll do some clever data analysis over it. I'll correlate it, and then I prioritize that for the security team to then review. In a nutshell, that's how it works.
Fantastic. And of course, what are the main benefits of the SOC.OS platform? Because I'm interested in the kind of value that it would provide to anybody listening or any businesses out there. Is there any main benefits that it offers, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always frame it, how I always answer this question is, think of hiring a superhuman analyst, security analyst on your team that is sitting there 24/7, 365, analyzing every single alert that's coming across all your security tools and having this superhuman memory brain that just remembers how every single one of them are connected. And then it sits there and it goes, this analyst says, here you go, I've just analyzed 10,000 today, and Neil, here are the ones you should be looking at. So if you think of it like that, in that context, the benefits are quite clear. You get a massive efficiency saving, right? You get this superhuman analyst, which is a lot cheaper than hiring the superhuman analyst. So you get a SaaS product that's going to be there doing that for you. So you get a huge efficiency saving. And for a lot of our customers, it's the first time they've got everything in one place. So there's a massive benefit of having it all in one sort of central single pane of glass, and a central place where you can have control and reporting. That's in a nutshell the main benefits.
Excellent. And just to bring everything that we've talked about here to life, do you have any examples of how it helps a small, let's say, internal security team manage that growing number of alerts produced by those threat detection tools? Because like you said, there are so many false positives, and that causes so many mistakes on its own. But are there any examples you are able to share?
Yeah, sure. So two come to mind. One is more of a compliance help here. So we had one customer that had a tool that was spitting out lots of alerts and saying, one alert at 6 o'clock in the morning, then 7, then 8, then 9, then 10 throughout the full day, right? Sending alerts. And you got to imagine that these alerts are coming off all these other tools as well, and there's thousands of them from one tool. But what SOCOS was able to do was go, we've spotted, I think it was 40 or so alerts throughout the space of a day. And we've gone, actually, all those 40 are related. And what the incident was, and I think people will be able to resonate with this, is one of the antivirus products that they had thought that they had got rid of, and they had upgraded the version. In fact, 40 machines still on their network was spitting out alerts and trying to update the solution. And the IT security manager, rather than just spotting one alert, maybe he would have come across one or two and then patched 2 of his antivirus products, 2 machines. He was able to see with SOC.OS, because SOC.OS grouped all those 40 into a related cluster. And in one picture, the analyst was able to go, okay, all these 40 machines in my network are trying to upgrade their antivirus solution, but are being blocked. And so that was a bit of a compliance breach, because, okay, we don't have that version anymore. And so the analyst was able to look at that picture in SOC.OS and say, there are all the 40 alerts associated with that one single incident. And then the so what moment is, okay, he's going to go to every single one of those 40 machines, which is very clear on the SOC.OS portal. He can go there and he can fix and he can patch and he can do the remediation steps necessary. But before that, think about what he couldn't have done. And usually what happens is a few of them would have slipped through the cracks. So he would have seen 1 or 2, maybe patched 2 machines, but then there still would have been 38 or so still out there in a compliance breach. So that's sort of one main example. And another real quick one is a firewall example. Real basic. You have someone trying to probe maybe a web server, one external entity probing you for 6 weeks. And your firewall is picking this up, and your firewall is spitting out alert after alert after alert. And what SOCOS is able to do is, rather than just give a single console where you see, say, 1,000 alerts across a 6-week period, all spaced out a day apart, what SOCOS gives you, again, just one single picture that says, here's 6 weeks worth of data, all associated with the same incident. And then the analyst has that visibility of, okay, I know who's the external attacker. I can see that they've been probing me for 6 weeks, and I can see that in one quick glance. And then you can go and remediate effectively.
And there is so much about your story that I love, because it's completely unique. I mean, when you came on there, we're talking about you being a Spanish-speaking Aussie in the UK with a Flemish-Croatian background. But you're also, as far as I'm aware, one of the only engineering graduates that have gone from engineering graduate to CEO who's gone on to launch a business during a global pandemic. But so I've got to ask, what lessons have you learned on your journey?
Well, yeah, it's a big question. I mean, too many to list. But I think breaking it down. So, I mean, I think I'll give a soft skill example. I think would be a nice one. And I look back at my story, and I look back at the Chiron Tutors Day, where I had to wait for two years before BAE started. Then I had to do this. Then we went through this spin out when they were in the middle of a pandemic, as you said, and during a strategic divestment. I think what the big learning was is just the importance of that positive mindset. And some call it blind optimism. I call it a positive mindset. But I think that is extremely important. And I look back at the funding trail when I went out, again, during the pandemic. This is a BAE product that we're going to spin out, etc. The amount of times I heard a no, right? Probably pitched about 15 or so VCs and 13 no's, basically. And very easy to get disheartened and give up. But I think the biggest learning is just have that positive mindset and absolutely keep going. And I think that can be applied to all walks of life. So that's probably a softer skill, big learning that I've had. And secondly, probably around the futures in incubation process, which I touched on, was around just the importance. So if you're looking at it from a business perspective now, the importance of being problem-led and customer-focused. And that philosophy is and that culture is what we still hold today in our business. It's before we roll out a product feature, and advice to maybe the listeners who are building an early stage product. ask yourself the question before rolling out that feature, developing that feature. Literally say in the product meeting or with your co-founder, say, what problem is that feature going to solve for our customers? Or another way of rewording it is, if we don't roll out that feature, how else would my customer achieve their objective? And that customer voice in helping shape our roadmap, in helping shape our features, and always being relentlessly focused on that user, the user-centric element, and also the problem-centric approach. I couldn't recommend that enough for people to start adopting in their own businesses. And I think for me, that's one of the biggest learnings and one of the takeaways, and one of the things we still use today in our business day to day.
I love that. And it does feel like an incredibly exciting project to be a part of, especially because you've been there every step of the way. And I know it's early days, but what is it that excites you about the future possibilities of SOC.OS? Is there anything that stands out?
Well, absolutely. So I think the trajectory from here on in is firstly super exciting. We are now 6 weeks into our journey, and the roadmap ahead, the next few years ahead of us, we have plans to move abroad, so move internationally, so tap into the US market. So think of the learnings that come with that. The first time founding team. We've never gone across international borders, so the learnings are going to be fantastic, and the nuances around that, around the selling into a different market, the culture differences, etc. It's really interesting. I think just in general, I think as a blanket answer I could give it, just the diversity of learnings and challenges that lay ahead for us. So think about the product challenges, the R&D, how to build out our product, the roadmap, how do we execute against that roadmap and that vision, the digital marketing. So as an engineer, I hadn't had much experience in the digital marketing side, and how do you build a sales engine? How do you hire BD people? How do you inspire the team? How do you recruit effectively? All of these things, it's such a cross-functional experience. It's such the experience that I have moving forward now is so cross-functional. And I think at the heart, that's what really excites me. It's the marketing, the visibility and sales, the engineering, the product, and everything in between. And that's super exciting, and I'm pumped for the journey ahead.
And I'm sure for a lot of people listening, they're going to be excited to want to find out a little bit more information, or even reach out and contact you or a member of your team. So can you just point everyone in the right direction, the best way to find out all that information?
Sure. So best way for me is just reach out to LinkedIn. So I'm a big voice on LinkedIn. So David Mareels on LinkedIn, search for me and add me, please. Or Twitter. I've just started a Twitter account, so I wouldn't mind beefing up some of the followers and also connecting with you guys and having a chat. So my Twitter handle is @DaveMareels, which would be great. And then if you want to learn a bit more about SOC.OS or follow us, sure, you can follow us on our company page on LinkedIn. It's just search SOC.OS Cybersecurity, or go to our landing page, which we just set up, which is www.SOCOS.io. So that's SOCOS.io. You'll learn about what we're doing, the problem we're solving, and our vision, and you can also get in touch with us directly from there.
Excellent. Well, I'll add all those links to the show notes just so people can find you nice and easily. But more than anything, just a big thank you for coming on today and just sharing your story of how you dedicated your time to this SaaS project and the tool that's designed to help small internal security teams manage that growing number of alerts produced by those various, so many of them, threat detection tools now. I think it's a great story. So much value in that story as well for people listening all over the world. But thanks for sharing it with us today.
That was my pleasure, Neil, and thank you so much for having me. And I hope what I said was useful to someone out there. It would have made it all worthwhile if it was.
So a big thank you to David for discussing his experience of launching a business during a global pandemic. Not to mention the process of building out the initial team, developing the MVP, acquiring the first early adopting customers, and securing Hoxton Ventures and Speed Invest as investors. It really did have it all, didn't it? I mean, what a great story. And this is where I want to throw the virtual microphone over to you. If you have a great story that you would like to share in technology, or you would like to comment on today's interview, please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk, and you get me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Just look for @NeilC.Hughes. So a big thank you to David for coming on here today, sharing his great story. But tomorrow we're going to spin the wheel. Where it stops, nobody knows. But we will go to a different industry and hear another human story about how technology is transforming a business, an industry, or indeed our life or world. The only limits are our imagination. So hopefully you'll join me again tomorrow in exploring the art of the possible. And hopefully we'll all learn a thing or two together. But we've reached the end of this episode. But before I go, a big, genuine thank you from me for choosing to tune into this tech podcast every single day. I know it's a big ask, and it's you guys that make this show so worthwhile. So what I'm trying to say is a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.